For more, let's bring in Chad Day and Zeke Miller. Both are with the Associated Press, and joining us from our Washington bureau. Chad is an investigative reporter who got an early copy of Comey's book. We're going to get his thoughts right now. And Zeke is a White House reporter and CBSN political contributor. Chad, let's begin with you. You've read through the thing. What jumped out at you most?
You know what jumped out at me most is that, Jim Comey is kind of not afraid to punch back in kind of a Trumpian way. He discusses, he calls the president untethered to the truth. He also discusses, that the president is fixated on these salacious allegations. But he also takes some kind of jabs at Trump, in particular discussing the size of his hands, his hair, whenever he was briefing him, his first encounter with him. And so, he appears to be kind of not above needling the president a little bit when it comes to pointing out some things that are probably going to get his attention.
And those things, probably the least damning, are the most surprising, because James Comey has always conducted himself publicly and even through his Twitter feed in a much more kind of less insulting way. But Chad, you also say that he describes President Trump as a mafia boss-like figure. How so?
Right, and this is actually a recurring theme throughout the book, where he's talking about, this kind of comes up in his first encounter whenever he talks about how he was looking around the room after, they had briefed the president and his team on the Russian election interference, and there wasn't any kind of question. He wasn't getting the questions that would usually come up in briefings that he'd had in the past, about the serious threat and things like that. Instead, it turned into a discussion of optics and discussion, and he said that what flashed in his mind was his time being a prosecutor in Manhattan and prosecuting Mafia dons. He felt like he was trying to be kind of brought into the family, per se. And this is kind of a recurring theme that he refers back to, is that he sees the president as someone like a mafia boss who is trying to, demand loyalty from people and in his case, demand loyalty from him.
And Zeke, I want to bring you in on this, because the most recent experience the White House has in an incident like this was with Michael Wolff's book, Fire and Fury. They tried to prevent it from being released, and the publisher moved up the release date, and then there was an effort to discredit Michael Wolff. What challenges does this book present when you have a former FBI director saying these kinds of things about private conversations with President Trump?
Well, unlike the Michael Wolff book, which caught most people in the White House and in professional Washington by surprise, this is the most anticipated book released in Washington in months, maybe years. Certainly, it's a bigger book from a cultural standpoint than Hillary Clinton's sort of what happened, her tell-all and memoir of the 2016 campaign. This is far bigger than that as a national cultural moment, and certainly in Washington. So everyone knows this is coming, and they broadly know what James Comey says in it, and they certainly know now that that parts of it have been released by the press, have been excerpted in the press, and Comey is beginning to do his media rollout of it. The challenge for the White House here, like the Michael Wolff book, is so many of these allegations against the president, these stories are so obviously true. They are not the sort of thing that the president can go out and his aides can say didn't happen, because they are, in this case, in the Comey's case, they're backed up by memos that he wrote contemporaneously. They're backed up by other accounts and things like that. In the case of the Wolff book, which was to a certain extent a bit sloppy, there were obvious facts wrong. In the case of the Comey book, this has been vetted by attorneys, by professional editors and people. It's designed to essentially be bulletproof from his perspective. There may be those gratuitous shots of the president, but from the White House's perspective, it's going to be very hard for them to find factual inaccuracies which they can use to discredit James Comey. And for them, that's going to be the challenge of the next coming days and weeks.
Not as if they don't have many other major challenges to face right now. Knowing what you know then, Zeke, about how President Trump behaves, how the White House tries to respond in situations like this, how do we expect them to counter this narrative that James Comey is publishing?
Well, that really is the billion-dollar question right now, because it's almost, James Comey couldn't have picked a better week to a certain extent to release this book. It comes at a period of unprecedented turmoil within the Trump administration, the exodus of several Trump aides. The biggest difference, in a certain extent, between when Michael Wolff's book came out a few months ago and this book now is Hope Hicks is gone. So many of the people who were around the president, who were calming effects on the president, had that calming effect on the president, are gone. And he's isolated to a certain extent within the Oval Office. It also comes as he's weighing important decisions on Syria. Michael Cohen's office was raided just Monday. So the president feels under siege, and we don't know how he's going to react to that. We've seen in the case of Syria sort of mixed messages from a policy standpoint over the last couple of days. And if past is prologue here, in the case of the Wolf book, the president did certainly react vehemently on Twitter, banished Steve Bannon from his orbit, put out a statement like that. There are a number of people in the president's orbit now who may be trying to look at that index, calling up friends, trying to figure out were they mentioned in the book, did they say something that's going to get them in trouble with the president, because they don't quite know. The president's more unpredictable now than he was even 3 months ago.
Right.
And for a lot of them, that's going to be a big problem.
You make a good point about the timing. It could not come at a worse time for President Trump. Chad, you've already read through it. What can you tell us about President Trump's opinions of the infamous Steele dossier, according to Comey, and what is said about Hillary Clinton in this thing?
Right. So with the Steele dossier in particular, Comey describes him as fixated on this, and he actually relates, kind of a telling detail where the president was asking him to actually kind of investigate that or look into it to debunk the allegation that I'm talking about, a salacious allegation involving Russian prostitutes. And, what's kind of telling about this and a little bit revealing is that he says that it would be something that's distressing for Melania Trump, who's someone that we don't really hear the president talk too much about when it comes to the Russia collusion, what he calls a witch hunt of an investigation, and also when he talks about this dossier. And so that's actually a really telling detail that comes out of this book. In terms of Hillary Clinton, anybody that was waiting for Jim Comey to make an apology and say, I'm sorry for going out and making this public statement about Hillary Clinton, you're not going to find that in this book. He does express some regret for the way that he kind of framed some things in his press conference in July of that year, but he stands by that, and he also stands by his decision to inform Congress about that they had discovered emails. This is later on in the campaign, actually just a few weeks before, actually less than 2 weeks before the election, that they had found additional emails on the laptop of Anthony Weiner.
Pretty incredible. I could speak to you both about this for hours, but we have to end it there. I appreciate you guys coming in. Zeke Miller and Chad Day with the Associated Press. Thanks so much.